Now, let's just jump right in and talk about the new trailer for The Acolyte. And I know there are a lot of you out there who have no interest in this show, or maybe even want to see it fail for one reason or another. Many are not fans of Leslie Headland, the showrunner, which is understandable. However, as I have said before, I am going to go into this as open-minded as possible. I will give it a chance. I have some, I don't want to say issues necessarily, but I have some doubts or some skepticism, mainly about how the Jedi will be treated in this series. I have discussed that before in videos. But anyway, I'm going to do something a little different here for this trailer, or a little different for me. I'm just going to watch it. I'm going to pause at certain points and tell you what I think. And you are, of course, free to tell me what you think in the comments below. I have already watched it a few times, so this isn't like my first initial reaction to it. Though perhaps I should start with my overall feelings or reaction to it, which is that, yeah, visually, out of context, not taking anything else into consideration but how it looks pretty good. It also looks like it has a pretty decent budget behind it, and that it is going to be certainly a more adult-oriented show, more like Andor than, say, Ahsoka in that respect. Not that I necessarily want to compare this to Andor. It has a long, long way to go before I would put it anywhere near that category. But yeah, certainly the poster yesterday that gave us the lightsaber and the blood smear kind of implied this was going to be something a little more edgy, a little darker. Obviously, it's going to be darker. It deals with the dark side and kind of will perhaps give things from their perspective. But anyway, overall, visually, it looks pretty good. So now let's kind of dig into the details that we get, the few that we get. This was only like a 1.5-minute long trailer. And it starts with one of our main characters here teaching some Jedi younglings, telling them, well, basically telling them what Luke once heard Obi-Wan say in A New Hope, that your eyes can deceive you, don't trust them. Obviously setting the table for the Jedi being deceived, as we know they ultimately will be by the dark side and by Palpatine years down the road. Though this story is supposed to be laying the foundation for that, how Palpatine will eventually be able to deceive the Jedi is supposed to be shown to us here. And so, yeah, that's basically what we are implying right away at the start with what is being said to these kids. We then have him, Sol is his name apparently, or according to the closed caption, but he asks them what do they see, and one of them says life, one of them says balance, and then the final one says fire. Now, I don't know if this last one is supposed to be seeing the future and how things are going to be very bad, or if it is just the way this character sees the Force. One of the big things in the High Republic era, for those not reading it, is that all Jedi kind of see or interact with the Force in a different way. Some will see it like a giant ocean, some will hear like music, some might see fire. So I don't know if this is just how this character, this child, sees the Force, or if this is like prophetic. I think it's also possible that this is a sort of flashback within the show, that this is our main character, Amanda Stenberg's character, and she is kind of seeing the future at this point, thus making it kind of prophetic. Next up, we then see Trinity from The Matrix, or Carrie-Anne Moss, or whatever her character name will end up being. She is clearly a Jedi here. She gets into a fight with the aforementioned character, played by Amanda Stenberg, a more dark side character, or assassin it appears to be, and that is kind of what we've been told. Now, we also know about Carrie-Anne Moss's character that she does not use a lightsaber. She has developed a different technique, and we get to see a little bit of that here. And quite honestly, this is what I kind of expected Ezra to be like in the Ahsoka series, because this actually looks pretty good. Whereas in that series, Ezra was just like running around Force pushing people, even though there were rumors that he had developed or learned some secret Force technique. And so where that was disappointing, I have to admit this looks pretty good so far. We then hear the line that someone is killing Jedi and that it doesn't make sense. And, well, no kidding, it doesn't make sense. It is not easy to kill Jedi, so if someone is running around doing it, they must be someone pretty skilled. We then see Sol essentially mind-soothing someone, and that person then tells him, or at least it's framed this way, it may not actually be this way, but that person tells them that they sensed darkness. And so we already have this question coming up of how is this going to align with the prequels? If the Jedi are on the track of the dark side 100 years before those films, why in those films does it seem like the Jedi have not encountered the Sith in 1,000 years like they basically claim? Or seem completely mystified that the Sith could have returned at all when there would be Jedi on that very council who would remember 100 years ago, including Yoda, for example. We then see what appears to be Sol, again, fighting Amanda Stenberg's character, and from what I understand, and I guess this could be a minor spoiler, so apologies, But these two are supposed to team up to try to solve these murder mysteries, or who is killing the Jedi. So it looks like this is their first encounter. And from what we've also heard, her sister, Amanda Stenberg's sister, and she is playing both characters, her twin sister is supposedly a member of the Jedi Order. I don't know how true that is. We'll have to wait and see. We then get a character who appears to perhaps be a member of some type of cult. She seems like she is being revered as she goes and, I think, speaks to some Jedi. And she says this isn't about good or evil, it is about power and who gets to wield it. And though we do not know the exact context of this line, I have talked many times before about why I don't like it, because the Jedi, if she is speaking to the Jedi or implying something about them, the Jedi do not stop people from using the Force. They are not what many people think them to be. I made a whole video about this the other day, or maybe a week or two ago. They're not out there trying to stop anybody from using the Force unless you are a Sith who imbalances the Force and does a lot of really bad things. They're not going to track you down and kill you because you worship the Force differently or use it differently or anything of the sort. They will leave you alone. Also, as I tried to explain in that video, the Jedi are not these unfeeling, uncaring Vulcan from Star Trek-like characters. They have feelings, they have emotions. They don't force anyone to stay in the Jedi Order. If you want to leave and pursue a different life, you are allowed to do that, even if you are a Force user. And so I have an issue with this line, though again, I don't know the context of it. The character in story could certainly believe that the Jedi are wrong, and that is fine, that is interesting. But if the show itself is going to imply something about the Jedi using the Force wrong, or controlling it, or not allowing others to use it, that is just not the case. The trailer then ends with a scene that I'm sure has a lot of people excited, but had me, I gotta be honest, it had me shaking my head. We see several Jedi ignite their lightsabers and charge after someone, and this happens shortly after we see a red lightsaber throwing and cutting through trees. And then there is this blast of energy that takes out all the Jedi, which we are led to believe or to assume comes from a Sith-like or dark side using character. And again, my issue with this would be that the Jedi do not know that the Sith are around. They believe they have been extinct for 1,000 years. And so if you have this event where Jedi are being killed, if you find out that the Sith are behind everything or some dark side users are behind everything, why are they so shocked in the prequels that the Sith have returned, to the point where they even deny its possibility, basically? Now, sure, it's possible that all these Jedi die and they never figure out what happens, or for whatever reason are led to believe it is not the Sith, it is something else, or some offshoot of them, and they feel like they defeat them by the end of the show, and then 100 years later this is kind of forgotten or something. I don't know. I just don't know how you bring in the Sith, have them essentially investigated, and then, again, 100 years later in the story, they're like, nah, it can't be the Sith. We haven't seen a single sign of them in like 1,000 years. And so, yeah, again, I think the trailer visually, it looks really, really good. I'm actually pretty impressed on that front. I do, however, have a ton of questions. Mainly, as I've been talking about, how you bring in the Sith and have the Jedi essentially investigate the return of the dark side without realizing the dark side has returned 100 years later. I also fear, based on some of the things we have heard said outside of the trailer by those either creating the show or acting in it or whatever, things like there is no good and evil in Star Wars, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard said, or other things about how this isn't going to be kind to the Jedi, implying you are going to show them to be failures, which I've heard so many people try to claim. I talked about it a little before. So many people like to think that the Jedi are somehow evil and the bad guys of the story, and I am worried that this is what this show is going to try and imply, that the Jedi are at fault for the rise of the Sith. That balance is actually somewhere between the two, which is also the dumbest thing I've ever heard said. You do not need equal parts evil to equal parts good. You don't need equal parts sickness in a human body and equal parts health. That doesn't make you balanced, it makes you sick. Just like you don't need equal parts crime and equal parts good-natured people in a civilization. That also doesn't lead to a harmonious state. But anyway, that is personally my biggest fear of the show, that they are going to recontextualize the Jedi Order itself, that they are going to imply that they were wrong all along, and will set the table for a big change in the Jedi Order in the upcoming Rey movie, where she will discover that way back in the day, the original Jedi knew how to balance the Force properly, that it required dark and light, and then you just destroy what George Lucas was essentially going for with the Jedi, which is that balance is a harmony between being selfless and selfish. It's not even necessarily about dark and light. But anyway, I'm certainly not saying you can't show us or explain to us why the Jedi would ultimately be deceived 100 years later, why they would be unable to detect the dark side or sense Palpatine or the Sith's return, even though apparently they were investigating it 100 years ago, but whatever. I'm just saying I don't want to see them say that the Jedi way is wrong when that is the foundation or fundamental groundwork of Star Wars. If you're going to do that for the sake of telling an edgy story, well then you really don't understand Star Wars at all, is my belief on that. Because it is about good versus evil. It is about making right choices against wrong choices, and the consequences when we make wrong choices. It is about finding a way to be more selfless than selfish. It's not about trying to balance the evil side of you with the good side of you. That's all just a fundamental misunderstanding of what George Lucas was going for. But anyway, we haven't seen it yet, so I can't make any final judgments. I'm going to give this a fair chance. Again, as I said at the start, I know a lot of people have no interest in this. That's fine. I get it. And so if you're interested in finding out what this is going to be, good or bad, when it comes around June 4th, I will give you my honest takes. So if you don't want to watch it and you want somebody to review it who is neither going to be a shill or a hater out of the box, then I hope you look forward to my reviews coming in a couple months. But for now, that's all I got for you this time. So it is your turn to now take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this trailer. And I am fully expecting there to be some people who really hated it and some people who really, really loved it. But whatever the case may be, whatever camp you fall into, or maybe you're in between those two, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.